Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Motivational Intelligence Podcast. I'm Sean Johnson. It's our job here to deconstruct what makes people and organizations successful. Today, we're getting schooled by Dave Naylor on relationships. So this episode will be particularly insightful and helpful to you if you're looking to build new relationships, you're looking to mend broken relationships, or you're just looking to enrich some of the relationships that you already have that maybe have a solid foundation. But we walk through, and Dave walks us through kind of the timeless principles of what makes great relationships, what makes them strong, how do we know which relationships to invest in and which ones not to. Once we decide to invest, how do we actually do that? And it goes from finding out what's really important to that other person all the way through balancing the many different relationships you have going on at once in your life. So this is going to be a great episode if you are interested in more your personal life, but also your professional life. You know, this applies to whether it's romantic relationships, relationships with friends, family, kids, spouses, colleagues, bosses, employees. It's just about people. So enjoy this episode of the podcast. We'd love to hear what you think on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at 2Logical. And leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this. And we would love your feedback and let us know what you want to hear more of, less of, and all that good stuff. But for now, enjoy this episode.
The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is produced by the team at 2Logical. 2Logical is an international corporate training firm and the world's leading expert in motivational intelligence, which is the ability to understand, manage, and change the motives people have. 2Logical offers over 30 different keynotes, workshops, and full training courses to small, medium, and large Fortune 500 companies in 53 countries, a lot of which you're probably familiar with: Pfizer, Bank of America, GE, Constellation Brands, P&G, and more. All solutions are completely customized, and the feedback from these sessions will blow your mind. If you have any training or speaking needs or just want to say hey, head over to 2logical.com.
All right, we're back. This is, as promised, we came up with the idea, what was that, 19 minutes ago?
Let it never be said that we can't actionize things
exactly.
quickly.
We're quick, baby. Look at how we're turning these things out. We're doing the relationship episode.
You got to rodeo me when I'm in the office.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why I said, locking the door, you're not going anywhere. Let's get into it. So why don't we start here from your perspective? We kind of talked about in the previous episode about asking the right questions, but I think it'd be good for us to start from your perspective. What is the virtue of building relationships? Why? I mean, they take time, they take effort. Why do it?
I think that it's so much of the quality of our life really is tied to those relationships. They give us stability. They give us a support network. So much of I think of our happiness and our joy really does come out of the relationships that we build around us, probably as much or more so than anything else in our lives. And they've done studies that, just like they say that, my wife reminded me this weekend that that people who own dogs live longer, and
just trying to get you to get a dog.
Well, no, we already have a dog.
Yeah, she got another one.
Our dog's getting old, so she may be priming me. I'm not sure.
Slipping it in there.
But I've read things where the same is true. Married people live longer. And so the. I think our, the joys and satisfaction in our life are oftentimes directly correlated with the quality of the relationships we build. Yeah,
I think it's something that we intuitively know, but I think probably need to be reminded of every so often. It's easy to kind of forget that,
or take things for granted. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. So I figured maybe the best way for us to do this is let's walk through the life cycle of a relationship or relationships. So from beginning to end, starting with how do we, for somebody that we don't know or don't know that well or want to get to know, how do we go about building rapport with that person? How do we go about getting to know that person, who they are?
When I was 18 years old, I started working at Midtown Health Club here in Rochester, and I was a fitness instructor. And so what my job was to take people, through the basically through the Nautilus workout machines and teach them how to use the machines and kind of help them set up a program for themselves. And most of the people, here I'm an 18-year-old kid, I'm fresh out of high school. Most of the people were probably in their 30s, 40s, 50s, business people. Big gap from where they were in their life and to where I was in my life.
Sure.
And it was one of the most wonderful experiences I've ever had in my life. And it's funny, I look back on it now, and so much of what I learned through that job really contributed a lot to my life today. And I very quickly learned that I'm sitting there and I'm with this 45-year-old guy, and if the whole conversation is about this Nautilus machine and what it does and how he's supposed to be moving his arms or legs or whatever, it's going to be a very boring 45 minutes together.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just started building rapport, talking to people, and what I learned from that experience is that everybody has something that's interesting about them, right? And you don't know what it is, but everybody has something that's interesting about them, something they're passionate about, right?
Yeah.
And so the key to building rapport, what I've found with people, is figure out what's interesting about them, and ask them about that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how you watch people open up, you watch their defenses come down. It's amazing what they will teach you and what you can learn based upon that. So I to no small extent, I would say the key to building rapport with people, the key to building relationships or starting them, figure out what's interesting about somebody.
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think it's so true. If there's something that everybody has that something that they're super passionate about. Yeah. And that's one of my favorite things is when you figure that out for that person and you see them light up they just go off. It doesn't even matter what it is. It could be about whatever, but if they're talking about it with such enthusiasm, it sucks you up into it.
I had a guy in a group here, I don't know, it was a couple months back, and he was really into curling, right? Now, I don't really know much about curling, right? I mean, it's they got that big thing they slide across the ice, and they got the brooms. That's about the extent of what I know about it, you know? And he was really the first person I think I've ever spoken to who's into curling, So, I was just asking him all about it. I'm like, what's the point of the brooms, and what's this, and what are you really trying to accomplish? And and it was cool because you could kind of tell he doesn't get asked a lot about curling.
Sure.
So you watched him kind of light up, and I learned a ton about it, that I didn't know, which I think is cool, So that's everybody's got something.
Yeah. Well, I remember, when you and I first we're starting to get to know each other. That was, and it, I don't think it's any secret that you're a big wino.
And you say that in the most complimentary way.
Exactly. No, but I remember you telling me about
xenophile. I believe is the proper way. Wino maybe has a different connotation.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. That makes people think I live in an alley and drink out of a brown paper bag.
Yeah, but only really good wine.
It makes the alley seem so much more glamorous.
Yeah. But I remember you talking about, and even when we've gone out to dinner, it's cool to see, like, you light up when you're looking at the wine list.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this is a good one, or tell me about that one, and even you telling stories about you going on. I think was it in Napa? You went on the wine tour and they were talking about the oak tree.
Oh, Opus 1. Yeah. About how they the 100-year-old oak trees that they make the barrels out of. And stuff.
And they fly somebody over to France to pick out the oak tree.
Yeah.
And but there is, and I think that it's kind of like it's transferable, like that enthusiasm, like that when you're talking to that guy, you started the day not giving a damn about curling.
Yeah.
But somebody starts talking to you with that level of enthusiasm. All of a sudden, I'm really interested in curling now.
Emotions are transferable.
Yeah. And I think you said the same thing about me with coffee.
Yeah.
Like when I was running the coffee business.
Yeah.
But it is. I think that's.
I just ordered 10 more bags of that stuff.
Yeah,
by the way.
I really should have stayed in that business.
You should have got a commission.
Exactly. You're sending so much business to them.
My daughter and my wife now are both drinking it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we are going through so much of it. It's unbelievable.
It's so good, though, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah.
Shout out Thousand Faces.
Yeah, there you go. Athens, Georgia.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think that's a really, I think, a unique way, but so true to when you're trying to get to know somebody. I think everybody does. They have that little thing that they're, and it could be mainstream, it could be obscure. I almost kind of like it when it's a little more obscure. Yeah,
exactly. Because then it's something that you don't know a lot about, and it's just it's a chance to kind of expand your own horizons, and what's cool is that all of that stuff kind of goes into your library and it makes you a better conversationalist down the road as well. So,
Definitely. All right, so that's a good, I think that's perfect in terms of building rapport, getting to know somebody, find that thing that is interesting about them, find the thing that they're passionate about. Once you're kind of you build rapport with somebody, you get to know them pretty well. You've talked about that thing, you've bonded. How do you identify? I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I kind of look at, there's almost like these layers of relationships that you have. The people that are really close to you, to your family and your friends, and all the way out to acquaintances and people you met once and whatever. So what I'm kind of thinking is, how do you take, and maybe we could walk through kind of each of those, the steps through each of those layers. How do you identify, for somebody that you just got to know, or people that how do you identify who's worth investing in? Who's worth investing the time in, who's worth investing the energy in? Because you can't invest in everybody as much as you might want to.
So I'll share with you what went through my mind here as I'm thinking about that question.
Yeah, you had a smile come across your face.
I'm paraphrasing what he said, but I'm trying to phrase it the right way so I don't mess this up. I was on the phone with Randy Nemec here a few weeks ago, and Randy is the mentor of my mentor for those who haven't heard me rattle on about him before. But he said something that kind of stuck with me and came into my head when you said that. And he said, I always offer, I offer my hand, to somebody. He goes, I offer to help them, to give them something, to lift them, and he said the ones that offer back. He goes, I'll move forward with. He goes, the ones who just take, he goes, I don't really have a lot of use for.
Yeah.
And I hope I reiterated that in the right tenor, but I do think that's true. There's a kind of a symbiotic thing that happens in relationships or healthy relationships.
Yeah.
You know, where there's kind of the ebb and flow, the give and the take. You know, the mutual benefit, those types of things. And you know, I think those relationships, you have something that, you know, you build forward on. The ones where it's just one person constantly giving. I don't think there's a lot there for those. There's not a lot to stand on.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I think, you know, I think the two-way street, I think, gives the relationship more energy, more credence. But I think maybe it's also like, it's probably a good barometer for you know, how invested they are in you. Yeah. You know, kind of the other way around.
Yep.
And if they're not invested, you're kind of, you know, it's an uphill battle that you're never going to win.
Yep.
Okay, so I like that. That's a simple way to, you know, offer your hand and see who offers back.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you,
right.
Randy.
Yeah. Well, one of many thank yous. Okay, so once you decide to invest, or once you know, so you figured out that interesting thing about them, that fascinating thing about them, the thing that they're really enthusiastic about. You offer out your hand to help them. They offer back to help you. At this point, how do you invest? They're a person that is worth investing in. They're interesting. I like them. You know, they have, you know, shared values and all those kinds of things. What's the next step? How do you invest in that relationship?
You know, certainly time, benefit, you know, shared experiences, you know, and so there's a lot of different ways, I think, that, you know, you can invest in a relationship. It's, you know, my neighbor was finishing his basement, and you know, I have a trailer and he doesn't, so you know, we're heading out to Home Depot to buy lumber, you know, and so we load up the trailer with 2x4s and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and so we bring it back to his house, and we're carrying it down to the basement, and, you know, and then, you know, and I'm like, so what are you going to do down here? And he's like, well, he goes, I don't know, you know, and so next thing I know, we're kind of like doodling out with chalk on the floor, and you know, and next thing I know, I'm back in my basement getting a nail gun, and, you know, and so you know, so you look for ways to be a benefit. Yeah.
What about for you know, maybe you married your high school sweetheart.
I did.
Yeah. You're featured in Cosmo about it. Which is actually true. I'm not even being funny. That's actually true.
In a million years, I never thought I would be in. I never thought my picture and my story would be in Cosmopolitan magazine. That is the truth. Yeah.
The peak.
Yeah. Really.
That's when you knew you made it.
I made it. That's when I knew.
So
it wasn't the birth of my first child. It wasn't. No, you know, it was Cosmopolitan magazine. Yeah.
Cosmo. So with your relationship with Michelle, how did you build that over time? You know, how did you invest in that? You've talked before, and you mentioned before about, you know, figuring out what's important to them. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, you know, and admittedly, that wasn't, you know, in the you know, I was 16 when I met Michelle. So I don't think I know I won't even hedge. You know, that thought process wasn't even part of my awareness at that stage of the game. You know, so you know, you know, with for you know, Michelle and I can't speak for her, but I guess maybe I can because we've been together for all these years. Was it 35 years now? 35. Not married 35, but together 35.
Wow.
You know, but you know, we enjoyed being with one another. We had fun together. We laughed and there was that aspect of compatibility, very early on. After we got married, and I was fortunate to have, just be exposed to to different ideas and concepts and things like that happen to spill over and into other areas of life. But yeah, one of the best lessons I learned about relationships was taking the time to really find out what is most important to that other person, and then making that important to you. And I remember, and it ties to the law of service. The only way we get what we want is helping others get what they want. It ties to that law of reciprocation, that when you help somebody, they feel, that they want to help you back. So all of that's woven into it. But I remember sitting in a meeting, and I was kind of just a casual observer, and Joe had asked, Joe's our CEO. He had asked another gentleman in the meeting. He said, what does your wife want? What's really important in her world? And I remember this gentleman, he just sat there like absolutely dumbfounded, like it just like I have no idea,
Baffled, yeah.
Yeah. And candidly, I sat there just as dumbfounded, because it never even had crossed my mind to ask that question,
Yeah.
And I remember I went home that night, and I literally remember sitting at the dinner table, and asking Michelle, I said, honey, what do you really want in life? What's important, and she, I think she was even taken aback that I was even asking the question, kind of like, well, and like she maybe thought I was drinking or what it was, but the after getting over that, that kind of, that looking at me like it was a space alien kind of look, And I remember her saying that night, we'd probably been married, I don't know, 6 months at that point. She said, I've kind of always dreamed of having a rock garden out in the backyard. And I literally got up from the kitchen table. I walked into our spare bedroom, which is where I had a home office set up, and I had a white 3-ring binder that was where I had my goal plan. I'd written down all my goals and all that kind of stuff in there, and I brought it out to the kitchen table. I opened it up and I wrote down "build a rock garden," and so her goal became my goal at that point, and 3 months later, we went out to Master's Quarry, bought 6 tons of Pennsylvania moss stone, and put a rock garden in the backyard. And what's funny is that was 2 houses ago, and in every one of our houses we have a rock garden.
Put a rock garden.
Yeah. And it all dovetailed back to that night, and so taking the time to really, whatever it may be, whether it's cleaning up the kitchen, whether it's having game night, whether it's putting together puzzles together, whether whatever it is, just find out what it is that means something to that person, and put mental weight behind it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that is when you've been with somebody for 35 years, I mean, you go through all of the cycles. There are easy times, there's hard times, all of those things. But I think when you build enough of that positive type momentum, it gives you strength in the hard times.
Yeah. Did you guys set goals together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that we've done over the course of times, and sometimes we're better at it than others, admittedly. I don't want to be Pollyanna about it. but we sit down and we talk about and sometimes we do it on a more grand scale, like for the year ahead, and other times it's more of like the ongoing conversations, but sitting down and really talking about the kids and what are the real what are those real goals or real focal points for the kids. And it helped us especially when they were young and they were going through teen years and all of that kind of stuff, to make sure that we were on the same page and we were focused on doing the right things and supporting each other the right ways. So that made a huge difference in that. We have goals as it relates to our finances. We have goals that relate to or even like little things. It's funny, like I know we've talked about it over lunch at times. We started playing squash this past winter. Yeah. And that really came out of one of those conversations that we don't have. She goes to yoga class, I go to the gym. I'll run. She did. And we don't, from a physical standpoint, we don't do a lot of those things together, other than running races together now and then or something like that. So we decided, hey, let's take up squash together. Yeah. So that came out of that. So yeah. I think that creates the commonality, having those goals, and it keeps everybody. You're growing through life. Obviously, we're much different people today than we were when we were 16 and 15. But if you've got those common goals, that growth will tend to move more in a similar direction than a different direction.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was kind of be my next question. You said it's 35 years. How do you sustain a relationship for that long, a meaningful relationship for that long?
Yeah. It's interesting. Unfortunately, what happens over time is, good things happen over time and bad things happen over time. Over time you watch people die. Over time you watch people get divorced. And so we've had a number of our couples that we're really good friends with have gotten separated and divorced and those types of things. And and certainly Michelle and I've had our tough times, and what I watch happen in relationships is I watch relationships they really start to dissolve when couples stop caring about the other one's happiness. That's when when somebody gets entirely me focused and they're thinking about what they're not getting or what they're not happy about and all of that kind of stuff, and it builds up so much resentment that they just don't give a damn about what the other person's happiness or those kinds of things. And that always seems like the death knell for relationships.
Yeah, it's the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
How do you bounce back from, I think everybody goes through rough patches.
Yeah.
How do you bounce back?
I think that when couples are having a hard time, there's usually what you'll see is there's a spike of anger and negative emotions and things like that that happen, and I think what we've found is that you can't really resolve things when you're in that state. It's like you can't really talk yourself off the ledge kind of thing. So you gotta give things a little bit of air to so the emotions settle out so that you can really talk. So it's what Michelle and I do is when one of us is feeling like heated or tense about something, or we literally, like, we have a signal, we call it out, like, look, I can't talk about this right now. Let's talk about this tomorrow. Kind of thing. And so now you've got closure on it. So the other person isn't out hanging like, oh, you just give me the silent treatment kind of thing. All of that kind of stuff. And we also understand that it's, we're getting the emotions out of it right now so we can talk. So I think that's a big part of it. The other thing is that you really have to listen and try to understand how the other person is feeling and why they're feeling that way. And then what we do is we really work to validate that with one another so that she knows that I understand where she's coming from and why she's coming from that way, and vice versa. And in that way you feel heard, and you feel heard, you feel validated, and you feel understood. And that, I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, well, I feel like when you don't feel that, each side just ends up restating what their perspective, because they feel like they don't really get what I'm saying here,
right,
or they're not really hearing me here.
Right, and then you're not listening to the other person.
Butting heads the whole time.
That's totally what happens. Because you're so hell bent on getting out what's inside of you.
Yeah.
You're not hearing what's inside of them, and,
yeah,
and vice versa. You're right.
Yeah.
So it's just this like negative spin cycle that happens.
Yeah, just butting heads,
yeah,
like a couple of rams.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think what I've found, even in any disagreement, as soon as the clearer it is where each person is coming from, like, okay, why are you really upset? Why am I really upset? What's really going on here? The clearer that is, the simpler the path forward seems.
Yeah.
All right, I think we could probably do an entirely different episode on parenting, so maybe we'll do that. But one thing I wanted to, I think, I know personally I've struggled with this. I think probably a lot of people have, is you want to be there for everybody, but you can't be necessarily. You only have so much bandwidth, and so it feels like at times you feel guilty for you're investing in one area, and then therefore you feel like you feel guilty you're neglecting the other, or vice versa. And especially if you build up a lot of really great relationships over time, but high school, college, work, family, all those kinds of things, it becomes a lot to deal with. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you manage that? Is there a prioritization you have to go through? How do you make it can seem so overwhelming, and if you don't pick, then you're kind of half-assing it to everybody.
Yeah.
So how would we think about that?
It's you definitely have to have kind of those concentric rings of relationships around you. I think that's absolutely the case. And how I'm kind of going through this in my head as you're asking that question. I've spent the better part of my life traveling, right?
Yeah.
So I'll spend 100 days a year on the road, and so that in and of itself creates a very unique dynamic, and so that puts even more pressure from a prioritization standpoint and those types of things. So what I've learned, I've learned to be very in the moment with people, and I haven't always done as well at this, and but it's one of those things that I try to be very cognizant of now, because a lot of times there's things that that I want to do, or there's that selfish side of things,
Yeah, sure.
Something I want to get done, or I want to get to the gym, or whatever, or even I'll give you another example. Like I remember years ago, I would you come home from a week of travel. You've been in hotels and restaurants and all of that kind of stuff, and I come home and I desperately wanted a home cooked meal, real food, not restaurant food. And Michelle's like, "Oh, you've been gone all week. Let's take the kids and go out to dinner," And I'm like, the last time I another food restaurant, Yeah. But that was something that, again, it meant something to her. So it didn't. So I took what meant something to me and kind of put it to the side, and it's an affirmation that something Joe said is like, you need to be there for them now,
Yeah.
And so if that's what's important for them in that moment, then so be it. This Sunday was Father's Day, and I'd been to the gym in 2 weeks, and so I was like, okay, great. We did a family breakfast, and I was going to get to the gym, and so I had kind of my day mapped out. And we had a family, get together, and in the extended family in the afternoon, and my daughter Catherine comes down, and we got this project that we're working on down in my workshop for her grad party, and she was all excited. She goes, "Daddy, can we go down to workshop and work on that?" And so there's the one side of me okay, yeah, well, yeah, tell her that we'll do that as soon as I get back from the gym,
Yep.
And I'm like, what's really more important to me?
Yeah.
What's real, and that's kind of the values decisions. What's
yeah.
really more important, because they're both important. Physical health is important, and I made that conscious decision, and that was the cool part about it. It was conscious.
Yeah.
That what. I would rather spend the next 4 hours down there, with her working on that,
Yep.
and sharing that experience and sharing that time, than I would spend the next, half hour driving to the gym, an hour working out, half hour driving back, and then 2 hours with her down there.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I think you have to consciously make those decisions sometimes in the moment. What's really the most important thing right now?
Yeah. I think the in the moment thing is big because it gives you somewhere to focus. I think like the struggle happens when you try to think about all of them at the same time.
Yeah, and there's no way you can't. You got to pick and choose the battles because you can't fight them all.
Yeah, exactly. So. Maybe we could tie this up with something a little more broad in terms of our relationships. I think one thing that you kind of mentioned before was when somebody's fuming or frustrated but doesn't necessarily say it out loud. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. Is relationships can get to a point where there's a problem that they didn't realize was a problem until it's now it's a really big problem. Yeah. So in terms of kind of like weeding the garden, how should people be thinking about or reflecting on the relationships, like to make sure like, okay, are these healthy right now? Can I be pulling the weeds here, so that what could be a little issue right now doesn't snowball into a big issue in 3 months?
Yeah. What I used to do when something bothered me or whatever, I would kind of pull inside of myself and I would hold it inside of myself, And what I learned over time is the reason I did that is because I didn't want to appear weak, or I didn't want to appear vulnerable, or I didn't and so that was kind of like my defense mechanism, and I realized over time that that's not really a healthy thing to do, because it does cause things to fester, it does cause things to build, and and it breaks down communication, and so I think a big part of the key there is giving ourselves permission to be vulnerable and to be open and to express and share what's really going on in our head and why. and not be worried about the defense mechanisms or being or looking weak or being vulnerable or any of those kinds of things. And do you open yourself up to be hurt more? Yeah, potentially. But you also open yourself up to be understood more.
Yeah.
And so I was listening to somebody recently, and they made a comment that the only way to be trusted is to be trustworthy, and the way that you're trustworthy is by being vulnerable to somebody else. And so I think that's a big piece of it, is letting down our guard, letting down our walls, letting down our defense mechanisms, and just opening up and communicating, even though it may be scary or in that moment. And I think to a huge extent that's a big piece of what builds solid relationships that stand the test of time.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to wrap up. Do you have any closing thoughts, comments before we?
Yeah, I just, I think if I had to give anybody advice, value relationships more than money. They last longer.
Truer words have never been said. All right. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, one more thing before you take off. This is Motivational Intelligence Insider. It's just a very short, exclusive email every Monday that comes from Dave, John, and the guests on this show. This is the only place they share their very, very best stuff, and it's delivered right to your inbox every single Monday. This could include exclusive tips for upping your game, articles they're reading, videos they're watching, stories from the road, and on and on. It's the best way to kick off your week, and this content comes directly from Dave, John, and the guests, and is only available to subscribers of Motivational Intelligence Insider. So if you want these guys and gals to email you their best stuff, go to 2logical.com/insider. That's the number 2logical.com/insider, and drop in your email. And if you do, I hope you enjoy.
The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is produced by the team at 2Logical. 2Logical is an international corporate training firm and the world's leading expert in motivational intelligence, which is the ability to understand, manage, and change the motives people have. 2Logical offers over 30 different keynotes, workshops, and full training courses to small, medium, and large Fortune 500 companies in 53 countries, a lot of which you're probably familiar with: Pfizer, Bank of America, GE, Constellation Brands, P&G, and more. All solutions are completely customized, and the feedback from these sessions will blow your mind. If you have any training or speaking needs, or just want to say hey, head over to 2logical.com.